The summer. The winter went suddenly and summer came. There was no spring. We have been reveling in really hot weather, and now all the trees are in leaf, the woods carpeted with wild flowers, and the nightingales in full song. To realize what the change means to us is impossible to anyone who has not tried our winter conditions. To be warm, comfortably warm, always and without an effort. We think of the horrors of Réaucourt as a hideous dream. Aeroplanes entertain us every day. The air is full of exploding shells, but the planes still sail on unaffected. A few nights ago, a few Boche planes sailed around dropping bombs. None came our way, fortunately, but we heard the explosions without any trouble, and we shaded very quickly our lights. Happily, the district is a big one, and it is one chance in many thousands against a bomb dropped in the dark doing any harm. An old English general has just visited and inspected us and said nice things to us. And he has also brought equally complimentary remarks from our Army Corps General, who says he is very pleased with our work and proud of us generally. So we are all walking about 1 inch higher than usual and thinking that we are remarkably fine fellows. Life has its compensations, and little bits of appreciation like this atone not for the periods of hard work, which bring their own reward, but for the long, long weeks of waiting, and the enforced idleness, which is the hardest thing to bear. To a finish. New men are still coming to us. We have 23 real live ambulance cars, 2 touring cars, a workshop car, a light camion, and, for as you may have discovered, we must eat, a traveling kitchen. We have cleaned and painted our cars, pulled them to pieces and put them together again, and are ready for anything that may come. The news is good. Another 5,000 prisoners today by the French, and our own men proving themselves irresistible in the north. Nearly 50,000 prisoners in 2 or 3 weeks, the impregnable Hindenburg line in danger, and the German reserves gradually being wiped out. What food for the German glycerin industry! Let them fight to a finish. The Hun must be killed or left powerless, no matter what it may cost. One's life doesn't matter. Finance does not count. The call has come to this generation to die, if necessary, and to face financial ruin without complaint, in the work of killing off the dreadful Huns for the benefit of posterity. Wives must lose their husbands, fathers their sons. The cost must not be counted, but the work done, and completely done. Do not call for an incomplete peace, you people at home. Complete victory is the only solution, no matter what it cost. Come over here and see what this war means. Visit Belgium and study German methods. The German Superman, who knows not God or devil, is an impossibility. The blessed fatherland that bred him has to be invaded and the beast killed. This is war, and in this war nothing else matters. Nothing must be allowed to count but victory. The party politician, the professional pacifist, is not yet dead at home. Alas, I am afraid they never will die. But the vast majority of our people are beginning to realize the task before them, and to understand their duty. Germany has become an abomination in the eyes of the world. It is a privilege to be allowed to die in helping to kill the monster, an obligation to willingly offer our sons. We must pay the price willingly and fully. It is the great game, the great sacrifice, and thank heaven we understand it. For 2 months we have basked in the most delightful summer weather, taking our ease. There is practically nothing to do. It is a demoralizing life of laziness. About 1 hour's work a day per head on an average. We seem to have taken root at Blaircourt. As a convoy, we are very flourishing, both in men and cars, but extraordinarily idle. Early in the morning, about 5:30 a.m., and at tea-time each day, the Boche plane comes over and is shot at. He keeps so high that it is difficult to pick him out among the little black and white puffs that mark more or less the line of his flight. 2 of them have not got back lately. The French have got a new anti-aircraft gun. I have at last seen 2 or 3 fights in the air. The sound of the mitrailleuse travels very easily. A tiny pop, pop, pop comes from the blue sky miles up. At last you see 2 little planes maneuvering. At last you see 2 little planes maneuvering very gracefully around each other. Suddenly, one falls like an autumn leaf. You hold your breath momentarily. It seems so awful that the machine should crash to the ground from that amazing height. You feel sick. But it is nothing, merely a maneuver. Air warfare now involves all the tricks that 3 years ago astonished and amused the public. To loop over or under an opponent is absolutely necessary. To fall like a dead leaf is often the quickest way of getting out of difficulties. A perpendicular nosedive is nothing. The pop, pop, pop goes on. The planes rise high into the thin clouds and disappear over the lines. Sometimes there are 2 opponents, sometimes 5 or 6. Sometimes the Germans are shooting at one end and the French at the other, and as they are both rapidly changing their positions, the result is a general mix-up. Yesterday, on their way home from duty, 2 friendly planes entertained us. They looped and looped over and under each other, nose-dived and side-slid, and withered-leafed for 15 minutes, gradually dropping lower and lower until the hill between us and their aerodrome shut them out. It was beautiful. 'Tis well to be young enough to fly. I saw and heard a great explosion yesterday. A munition dump, for some reason or other, caught fire. It happened about 3 miles away from our camp. The first shock was terrific, like 100 big shells bursting at once. The weather was exceedingly warm, and as I thought that the explosions would soon be over, I remained on my bed. "The Germans are bombarding," said someone. "Good God," I said, "if that is a new German shell, we had better move back 20 miles. It wasn't soon over. The bangs continued, and a huge cloud of white smoke rose, blotting out the east. After a quarter of an hour or so, I could lie still no longer, and made haste to climb the hill, where I found 4 or 5 of our men sitting watching. The fire appeared to be dying down, but suddenly a new section of the dump caught, and with a mighty bang a great red flame shot into the air. A column of smoke, 600 feet high, followed the flame, and in that smoke thousands of little explosions reverberated, and the ground trembled. We were sitting at least a mile away, but the blast of air hit us very hard. From the black smoke shot shells like sprays of water, and on the fields around appeared little white explosions. I was amazed. It was the biggest fire I have ever seen or am likely to see, and I shall never forget it. But why it came, I know not. July 1917. Two events of interest have happened. First and foremost, a member of the London Committee has been out to see us. He gave the convoy a few minutes of his time, expressed himself highly satisfied with all he saw, visited Fromerville near and Verdun, and disappeared. Of, comparatively speaking, more importance is the fact that the Germans made a push on the Mortem and 304 to our left, and that all the cars were out for 48 hours, busily assisting the American ambulance at Dombasle to evacuate wounded. Our cars carried in one way or another 1,200 cases. We have moved to a peaceful spot and a very idle life miles and miles from the front, and are once again hidden under the trees in the pretty park of a minute chateau. A river flows through the grounds, and many members of the convoy diligently fish for trout, of which there are none. The fish of that stream have long since been killed by means of dynamite cartridges and bombs. But none the less, the patient fishermen still wield their fly rods, and only yesterday one of them returned radiant with success. He had had a bite. This is the best record so far. Our commandant, the English chef de section, has left us after 2 years' service, in which his life has by no means always been a happy one. What with an honorary captaincy based on no solid foundation, a control shared, or at any moment completely ignored by the French lieutenant, over some 40 Englishmen ranging in age from 17 to nearly 60, the difficulties of satisfying 1. The French, 2. The London Committee, 3. The convoy, at one and the same time, the worry of trying to disentangle opposing English and French regulations, both equally binding. To have endured it for 2 years says much for the tact and equanimity of our late chief. He got his croix with 1 or 2 palms, and he certainly deserved it. During his 2 years of office he has seen nearly 80 men pass through the convoy, and these 80 Englishmen have between them moved no less than 30,000 wounded or sick without mishap. It is a record of which he and the convoy with him may well be proud. The committee member who saw us at dinner for 3 minutes has written a letter in which he places on record that from my own inspection and from all the reports we have received, the work of the convoy has of late reached a high degree of excellence. So all is well. August 1st. The news has come in that we are at last going to do some important work, short but sweet. August 14th. We are up at last. We arrived 3 days ago, and were shown the side of a hill with trees and nothing else on it for our camp. The authorities seem to think we don't require anything else. We are doing our best, but when it rains... Our cars are covered with branches, our tents, some of us have tents though we were told we should not want them, are hidden in the wood. Every day, and sometimes twice a day, a thunderstorm comes along and soaks us. Regularly, every morning and at night, the Boche sends a few shells screaming over our heads. Down below, in the valley, they are building a barbed wire enclosure for the prisoners that are to come in. A pleasant and hopeful anticipation of events. Our cars are all in order, we know the roads, and are only waiting for the fun to commence. Last night, the guns around Avoucourt, to our left, had a concert of their own. Our guns have not yet spoken. They have crept into their places in the dark, and are laying low and saying nothing. They have crept into their places in the dark, and are lying low and saying nothing. No inquisitive Boche plane has been allowed to come over and inspect them. There are a terrible lot of them, big and small. The Foreign Legion and the Moroccans are here. Soon all these guns will begin their music, and will keep at it night and day for 7 or 8 days, and then the shock troops will go forward, and Mortam and 304 will be entirely French once more, and the Boche moved back a couple of miles. The attack is to be on a front of 18 kilometers, and the French are quite confident it will be a success. Certainly there are enough guns here to do the job thoroughly. I am waiting anxiously to hear them all talk. Our work won't really begin until the infantry move forward, and then we shall be driving night and day without ceasing until the affair is over. There is a little post on the side of Hill 273. It is our objective. We have, some of us, visited it before, in, comparatively speaking, peace times. The road, as it goes further and further up, narrows, and is in places very soft. Shell holes of no mean size appear in it. There are batteries of French guns close at hand, and in trying to find these the enemy plays havoc with the road. Already one of our cars has spent an uncomfortable 4 hours in a hole there. It was full of water, the night was dark, and he had no lights. How could he know it was 4 feet deep? So in he went, and there he stayed. He tried to bail out the water, only to find there was a small river filling it up much faster than he could empty it. There was nothing to do but unload the wounded and wait for help. The gunners near at hand came to his assistance, and at last he arrived like a drowned rat, minus his jack, which he had lost in the mud. We are to climb and descend steep hills of 1 in 6 or 1 in 7, and make our way, 1 car every 15 minutes, to 273. Load up and return via the distributing hospital. In the daytime we could do the round in 2 hours. At night, bar accidents, it will take us 3.5 hours. I have a disc at the back of my cap that shines at night, so that when I walk to try and show my friend the road, he won't run over me. At his quite reasonable suggestion, I have also provided him with one. There will certainly be shells about, more, I think, in the first 4 days than when the infantry attack begins. I have a theory that then the Germans won't have time to worry about the roads, and it will be exceedingly interesting to know how this and other theories will bear the test of experience. We are all hoping to be allowed to go up in the daytime. It is infinitely pleasanter to face the dangers you can see, with the going made easy by the daylight, than to crawl at quarter speed in the dark, uncertain of the road, fearful of the traffic, and blinded by the shells. I hear there is to be a rope left at a certain point, and a load or 2 of stones at another, so that we may be equal to emergencies, and a room is being provided in our village where we can stop a moment for hot coffee, and rest for a short time when the work eases off. So at last we are going to see something and do something, and we are all very content. August 16th. Our hillside might be a very charming position for a picnic in an ordinary August, but now, after 10 days' rain, it has lost its novelty. The cars are pushed out and churn up the soft surface. We waddle about in 2 inches of greasy, sticky mud, collect pounds of it on our feet, and spread it all over our clothes. Everything is either wet or very damp. Storm follows storm, and the thunder entirely overwhelms the noise of the guns. We have commenced a service, but the real thing hasn't yet begun. Last night I turned in early. Comfortably warm on my stretcher, enjoying a cigar, I watched through the open back of my car the lightning and the flashes and flares of the guns illuminating the wood. The rain came down in torrents, and the vibration of the cannon kept my wooden windows in a continual tremor. An engine started on my right, and I felt thankful it wasn't my turn out. About midnight, the naval gun began again, but he was evidently in quest of something several miles beyond our range. I think he lives at Montfaucon, some 8 or 10 miles away. Montfaucon stands up like Mont Saint-Michel, and dominates all the country around. The Germans have been established there from the early days of the war. There isn't much left of Montseville, was the report of the car which I had heard start out. He had been through that interesting village, and got a shell within a few yards of him. A bit of it, or a bit of something put up by the shell, had gone through the side window close to the other conductor's nose. For the rest, no damage at all. That shell was travelling, fortunately, in the same direction as the returning car. I wish I had been taught a few very elementary accomplishments before I came out here. For example, washing clothes. In this muggy, damp, weather-changing attire produces the result of a Turkish bath. In this muggy, damp weather, changing attire produces the result of a Turkish bath. To be comfortable afterwards one must change, and I only brought up one spare set of underclothes. After serious consultation with various members of the convoy, I have steeped my nether garments in cold water for many hours, have wrung them out with more water and scrubs ammonia, have re-wrung them with clean cold water, and now they are hanging in the sun to dry. What will be the result? My companion tells me he has washed his things, and they are much blacker, but clean. Today the sun is shining, the wind has changed, and the mud is drying up. Can you conceive what that means to us? I have had a sort of spring cleaning of my belongings, the sort that would horrify my people at home. Last night at 9:30 p.m., we started off for our post. In the darkness, but with quite a good natural light, we went up through Dombasle, through the Bethleinville wood, on a good road, protected by artificial screens erected for a mile or so on both sides, past a long dead horse that smelt horribly, down to Montseville, or what is left of it. A few hundred yards further on, we stopped at the crossroads to ask our way. A wagon came along, and the driver directed us and warned us not to stay longer than necessary at that point, as it was unhealthy. We didn't. It is curious how these hills and valleys break the sound. At our camp we could hear nothing. 3 or 4 kilometers out, on the top of the Montseville hill, the sound of the guns hit us with a shock. There were hundreds of them hard at it, and we were going into it. In the darkness every gun flash could be seen. The sharp, short crack of the 75, the boom of the bigger stuff. The valley was alive with it all. Hill 304, Mortom, the Bois Boiroux were exchanging the most rapid of compliments. Along a narrow, badly broken road, we took the car very slowly for fear of breaking the springs. A battery or 2 of French guns from a distance of 100 yards or so fired over our heads. The hum of the engine drowned the general noise to some extent, but it was sufficiently deafening. We passed a party of soldiers working on the road, whose duty it is to fill up the shell holes as they appear. A pleasant job. I was glad to see them. Their presence meant that we had nothing to fear from road caverns. But what a life! Road repairing in the dark, under shell fire. It made our work seem child's play. There they are at it all night on the open road, keeping the way open. I wanted to get down and shake hands with them. A kilometre more of bumps and squirms at a walking pace, and we found the post with an old friend in charge. I turned the car and waited about 15 minutes, and while the engine was silent, had time to look round and take in the scene. I cannot describe it, just flashes, noise and whirs. Sometimes a gun near to us made itself more conspicuous than the others. Sometimes a score or two shells together would sing through the air like a swarm of vicious wasps. Ahead of us, the Bois Boiroux was getting much German attention, and was at least returning as good as it received. A French soldier pointed the positions out to me. The hill crests were all ablaze, and I felt particularly glad that I was not going home by Bois Boiroux. My friend, who had not been under serious fire before, pleased me very much by the calm way he took it. The only thing he objected to was the smell of that horse. It really was rather bad. We discharged at Clairchen, got home at 12, shaded the car windows, lighted a candle, and had supper. The supper, was thoroughly enjoyable, and now today the sun is shining and the mud is really drying up. Verdun, showing the cathedral towers. From the Quai de la République. At Jouy. Waiting, a 2-story dugout for wounded on the right. Another man has just joined, and now there are 45 of us. He was a little surprised at our quarters, having been told in London that we were always billeted in a village. That fiction still exists with the committee. As a matter of fact, we are never billeted. Fortunately, a car is going into Bar today, and will bring out some of the things he would himself have brought had he known better. The heavens are very interesting here. Planes, many hundreds of them. I saw a new one yesterday with tremendous power. It rose rapidly in short spirals, and then bolted off over the German lines at twice the speed of the usual machine. From the edge of a wood last night I counted 19 French sausages and 9 German. August 19th. We are told the infantry attack begins at 4 a.m. tomorrow, and all our cars must be in readiness at 6 o'clock. Great excitement! A Boche plane has just been brought down by anti-aircraft fire. The first I have seen fall, and I have watched many thousands. The plane must have been winged. She turned over and over, not falling very quickly, and hitting the ground a mile or 2 away from us. We all turned out and cheered. A lucky shot brought the plane down from 16,500 feet. The observer was killed, the pilot uninjured. It was all worked out beautifully. The attack was to begin at 4 a.m. Our cars were to go out at 15-minute intervals, controlled at certain points on the roads to 272 and 232. Hot coffee would be found at so-and-so. So I turned in at 9:30 half undressed. But of course the Boche interfered with our plans. He launched a gas attack an hour or 2 before, and at 2 a.m. the call came, all cars to turn out. We could smell the gas at our camp. The night was fine and the light good, but the dust extreme. I reached 272 about 3:30, and stayed there some time. The noise of the French guns was terrific. For nearly an hour we waited and watched, and during the whole time I was never conscious of a single German shell. This was as I imagined it would be. The enemy were too busy preparing to counter the coming infantry attack to spare any attention beyond the front trenches. As 4:40 arrived, the exact time of the advance, many Frenchmen around us left their shelters and climbed on to the nearest mound looking in the direction of 304 and Mortam. The daylight had come, and there was little to see, though much to hear. We got 4 slightly wounded Frenchmen, and went off to 272 to fill up. There we heard that the affair already promised to be a success. With 10 cases inside and 1 on the box, we crawled slowly back. As we approached the French battery that is so very near the road, I saw the flame of one gun shoot right across our track. We waited till it had fired again, then tried to rush past. But just as we got in front, off the gun went. I put my head back, and the only damage done was the destruction of our 2 tack windows by the concussion. In the daytime, one of the gunners puts his hand up when he is to fire that piece. He may do the same at night, but we cannot see him. During that time there was a smell of gas about, and some of the cases I took down were intoxiques, but it was not bad enough to worry us. We preferred it to the dead horses. About 7 a.m. I got back to camp for some hot coffee and tire repairs. We had to change 2 on the road that night, then off again, and so on for 10 to 12 hours on end. At the clearing hospital we found halfway through the day a congestion of loaded cars. Our French officer took the matter in hand at once, and we unloaded the wounded ourselves and hurried back to the front where we were wanted. Why the French hospital arrangements should always in an emergency break down, I don't know, but so it is. 20 or 30 full cars waiting at the base for an hour, when all the postes de secours were crying out for them. Later on, Clairchen became merely a calling place, and we were sent on long distances inland before we could be free. The nearest American ambulance, SSO 18, turned out and helped us splendidly. Home at 4 p.m., exceedingly dirty, hungry, and very tired. We cleaned out the car, attended to the engine. I put out my bed so that I could sleep in the open, and at 8 p.m., minus only my boots, leggings, and coat, turned in to watch the stars and listen to the hum of a German bomb-dropping plane that the French searchlights were vainly looking for. At the end of 2.5 hours, I was awakened by my friend with, "We are going out." In a few minutes we were ploughing through the dust again. We reported at Bezonville and made our way to 232. Halfway there we were held up by an ammunition convoy close behind a big battery. The battery was firing heavy shells without a pause. We were alternately blinded and deafened. I looked at the shells. They were 10-inch. It was a heavy howitzer, and made a devil of a noise. All round, the ground was ploughed up with huge holes. It must be a warm corner that occasionally. There were fireworks of all kinds besides the guns. German searchlights looking in their turn for French planes, rockets, clusters of balls of fires, flares, and big crimson illuminations like a glimpse of the coming dawn. It was very interesting. Home at 1:30 and sleep. In one of our daylight runs, the Germans began dropping shrapnel and high explosives on the road 200 yards in front of us, and about the same distance short of the post. We were on our way up with an empty car. I pulled up and looked on. An American Ford came through it, obviously in a hurry, and we stopped him and asked him, 1, what it was like, 2, if there were any wounded waiting for us. To question number 1, he said he didn't want to go that way again just then. To number 2, yes. We watched the practice for 2 or 3 minutes, then seeing that very few shells actually hit the road, we started. We couldn't go fast, the road was too bad. We got through all right. The only thing that nearly hit us was at the post itself, when we were turning round. A shell exploded within 8 or 9 yards in the far ditch, which fortunately smothered it. Nobody hurt. I saw our médecin principal, with a wounded arm, get into a Ford and start off across country to 272. He is now in hospital. In 5 minutes, quite interesting minutes, we were called for and told we could go, if we chose, with 2 couchés, 1 a commandant. All right, we said, if they don't mind, we don't. We scuttled through again, watching with great amusement a crowd of German prisoners running for all they were worth to get out of the track of their own shells. Now it is safely over, I can say it was quite a jolly half-hour. The cage here has been full of prisoners 6 times. 12 or 1500 have passed through it, and there are many more cages around. I have seen several columns of these men marching back to the rear. The impression they gave me was that they were very glad to be taken prisoners, and that they were not by any means starved, though many of them were decidedly immature. The plane that was wandering around succeeded in damaging the hospital sheds at Vadelincourt, some 6 or 7 miles to our rear. About 20 were killed. It is thus that the gentle German teaches us to love him. August 22nd. 5,000 prisoners up to date, and more coming in, and the French have advanced about 1.5 miles and are established in exceedingly important positions in a semicircle of 18 kilometers around Verdun. No wonder they are all smiling and pleased, for this success, which is of great importance, has been achieved at a very small cost. For this success, which is of great importance, has been achieved at a very small cost. I was out all last night driving through clouds of dust. The artillery fire had died down, and there were no fireworks. Tonight I am to be allowed to sleep, and I need it. The artillery work in this action has been perfect. The French put a barrage of big guns on to the first position to be taken. As the infantry approached, this barrage was moved up to the next objective, and no less than 3 curtains of 75s were turned on in front of the troops, creeping forward at 30 meters a minute. It went like clockwork, and if there was any mistake it was due to some of the excited infantry advancing too quickly and getting under the fire of their own guns. The German prisoners state that the drum fire was overwhelming and that they could do nothing. One division went forward splendidly and suffered very little, most of their casualties being slight wounds. Their task was the taking of Mortam, and they not only captured the 2 peaks, but went about 2 kilometers beyond it. The Germans dropped a message saying that they knew all about the coming attack, and were quite prepared for it. If this were so, they made an exceedingly bad response. They lost, in a few hours, all their valuable positions around Verdun. The impregnable Mortam, with its Crown Prince and Bismarck tunnels, its elaborate electric light and pumping machinery, and its numerous comfortable chambers, the Cumières Wood, Comte de Talus, and a score of other points, have returned to the French. The whole of 304 has yet to be taken, but it is only a matter of a few hours. Now the German is angry and is hating everything. His planes are dropping shells on hospitals and his guns shelling the whole earth indiscriminately. If it gratifies him to plow up the fields and waste ammunition by shooting into space, well and good. If he thinks he will end the war by killing a fair proportion of his own wounded in hospitals, one must remember that he is, after all, a German. How does this affair compare with my first Verdun experience? The work has been infinitely easier and pleasanter. The main advantage lies in the weather. Now the days are long and the nights fine. It was never really dark, and we have no bad mud. In February 1916, one could not see an ammunition column, a stranded wagon, or a dead horse, unless he were within 3 yards of it. Every moment you had to be at acute attention to stop at once. If you turned off the narrow road, you were in the mud, and could not get out without assistance. There was no organization. Everything was chaos. Our own administration was bad. There was everywhere excitement, much gesticulation, bad temper, and noise. What a difference! This affair has been very pleasant and enjoyable, successful and well managed. We are exceedingly happy in our French officer. He is keen and able, ready to solve any problem as it comes along, and takes a pride in SSA 10 and knows much better than the hospital authorities how it should be run, and is not afraid to say so. We should like to do this sort of work permanently. It is exceedingly interesting, and there is just enough danger in it to make it at times very exciting. The work behind the lines is necessary, but it is very dull. Could we not be kept for these affairs, and the work of clearing hospitals, etc., be left to new convoys who have just joined and are unable to distinguish between the bang of a French gun and the noise of a bursting Boche shell? My last day up at 232 became interesting in the afternoon, when the rain cleared and the sun broke through. I was writing outside 232. The German guns began pitching black stuff and shrapnel around our post. Starting in the valley 200 yards away, they gradually crept up to us. After watching the result for an hour or so and retrieving a fragment of high explosive from the top of the car, and noting with pleasure a shrapnel dent in a front mudguard, a shell dropped on top of a shelter close to us and set up a fire, whereupon we were promptly ordered below. An hour later we crept up again, expecting to find the car in bits. It was all right, and in a few minutes we started homewards. I was very glad it was daylight. The road had been hit a score of times, and in the soft, muddy weather the shells had torn up many deep little holes, which meant for us broken springs, if not something worse. The car slowly crawled back, twisting and skidding. In front of us was Montsville, with shells dropping amid its ruins at about 3 a minute. Our way led through the village, and it didn't look healthy. But I think the shelling must have stopped when we got there. In any case, I didn't hear any, my attention being wholly given to the task of getting the car through as quickly as possible. We had the new medicine chef on board, and very wisely he did not want to do any sightseeing just then. The next day, September 1st, we started for the peaceful repose of the delightful grounds of the little chateau at Savonnières, and now we are, thanks to the kindness of General MacMahon, settled there. Our clean clothes have been unpacked, our boots and buttons polished. We are washed and clean, waiting for orders, far from the radius of Whistling Rufus, and so far undisturbed at night by bomb-dropping planes. There is no doubt about the brilliant success of the Verdun attack. Bar-le-Duc, I hear, was warned to expect 30,000 wounded. It received only 8,000, and the great majority of those were slight cases. The Germans say they voluntarily abandoned the positions. They expected the attack. General von Dietrich issued on August 17th the order, "You must expect to be attacked at any moment. The division must count only on its own resources. I hope that it will be self-sufficient and that it will beat the enemy." The Germans knew the value of their outlying heights around Verdun. Had they not spent 600,000 men in capturing them in 1916? If, said the general commanding a German division, the French ever take Hill 304, we are more than half lost, and if they once become masters of it, nothing prevents them from attacking in whatever position they choose. Yet the French infantry, protected by the threefold barrage of their guns, marched up that hill with their rifles at the trail. All the positions were taken, over 8,000 prisoners, and 29 guns. No wonder the French are pleased. September 3rd. It is now a question as to whether we leave our division and do humdrum hospital work, or follow it to another sector and do our little bit in another push. We are making every endeavor to be allowed to go with the division, and as all the authorities are pleased with us, there is a fair chance of our succeeding. The division has gone, but into repose, and we are left at Savagnières doing nothing. For how long? The usual complimentary messages have come through from the army authorities. A birthday party. September 4th was my birthday. I said I was 39, but alas. Anyhow, my good friend gave me a dinner at Bar. The evening proved interesting. There were 5 of us. After an enjoyable hour and a half at the café, we stepped forth into the moonlight to walk home when the siren began to sing of German planes. We stopped in the middle of the square to wait and see. In a few seconds the bombs began to fall in front and behind us. Then a bright red light sprang up to our left, and we went to investigate. On the other side of the river a motor repairing shed was blazing. By the light we saw on our bank the ruins of a café, which had collapsed like a pack of cards. There we were wanted, and we set to work to help the French soldiers to remove the debris, and get at the voices we heard moaning below. In that fitful, lurid light it was a weird business trying to move heavy masonry. Great stones that required 3 or 4 men to shift, wondering all the time whether the rest of the building would collapse. A dead soldier lay outside on the pavement. In a few minutes we unearthed another. 2 workers deposited a heavy boulder on one of my companions, and I saw him collapse and then get up and limp away. I found myself trying to balance a heavy paving stone that threatened to fall my side and flatten me. 2 Frenchmen came to my assistance, and I took the lamp. A friend helped to pull out a mass of tousled hair, dust, mortar, and blood. That turned out to be a soldier, only 1/4 dead. With his face streaming with blood, looking a mass of broken bones, he made us smile approval with his cry, "Vive la France! À bas les Boches!" as they conveyed him to the ambulance. A dead woman was then dug out, and there were no more. The fire gradually died down. A staff car with a lieutenant colonel drove up with its lights shining on the wreck. I got our bruised and rather disheveled 5 together and proposed to get back home. We left the town just in time. A second lot of planes came along a few minutes later, broke many windows, and did some material damage on the road, but hurt nobody. When we got to our quarters, there was nothing more serious to be done than a great deal of cleaning and bandaging. That scene amid the ruins impressed me greatly. It was weird. The wonderful soldier, his face streaming with blood, his limbs hanging broken in a dozen places. Vive la France! À bas les Boches! The true spirit of the glorious Second Army of Verdun, forgetful of self, fighting with single purpose, and wholeheartedly for France. The following night the planes came again. First the siren, all lights out, then the buzz of the aeroplane engines, a searchlight unable to distinguish anything in the clear moonlight, anti-aircraft guns in plenty, firing into vacancy. Then suddenly, bang, bang, bang! A few minutes' comparative silence, and then another plane, more guns and more bangs. So on for an hour and a half, with the occasional tattoo of a mitrailleuse. There seems to be no real antidote to midnight bomb-dropping planes. Fortunately, the bombs, though they make a great deal of noise and are very disturbing to one's slumbers, do generally very little harm. It is, in fact, pure bad luck when they hit anything. Last night, for example, from a distance of 2 miles, I heard and saw the flash of 7 of them. It sounded and looked very terrible. Today I visited the place. 1 building had collapsed, 3 great holes in the hospital grounds, any number of broken windows, but no lives lost. Tonight, probably, we shall sleep in peace, as the clouds and the rain have come. Midnight bomb-dropping on towns is one of the beastly things of modern war. The only thing to do is to clear the civilian population out at once and build shelters for the soldiers. It is to be hoped the Germans are getting or will get something of what they are trying to give the French. If they are, they won't like it, I imagine. Yes, it was a good birthday, for later on I got the brigade order of the same date, which gave to both my friend and me our croix of the Service de Santé of the Army Corps. Now I hear that the convoy itself has been cited in Army orders, an honor bestowed on no other British convoy out here, and held by one only of the numerous American sanitaire units. We did nothing for a month. The general of the Second Army came down and gave us our army citation. Le général commandant la 12e armée. Section Sanitaire Anglaise numéro 10, sous le commandant du sous-lieutenant Klinghoffer, a assuré depuis 1 an et demi l'évacuation dans le secteur difficile de la manière la plus remarquable. Les conducteurs, pour la plupart âgés et libérés de toute obligation militaire, viennent en cours d'une attaque récente de faire l'admiration de tout en parcourant en plein jour des zones violemment bombardées par l'ennemi et en assurant les évacuations avec une rapidité non obtenue jusqu'à ce jour. Which being translated reads, Section Sanitaire Number 10, under the command of Second Lieutenant Klingelhofer, has, for the last year and a half, carried out the evacuations in difficult sectors in the most efficient manner. The drivers of the section, for the most part men of mature age and free from any military obligation, have, in the course of a recent attack, gained the admiration of all by carrying on their work in full daylight in zones under violent bombardment by the enemy, and in effecting the evacuation with a rapidity never hitherto attained. No wonder we were pleased. We could hardly have wished for higher praise. 2 days later, General MacMahon, Duke of Magenta, son of the famous Marshal of the 1870 War, added to our obligations to him by kindly presenting us with our croix and making an excellent speech on the value of the Flanders offensive. We shall all have ever happy memories of the delightful little park at Savanière and of the kindly, genial French general who showed his English sympathies in so charming a manner. It was good to have earned a Croix de Guerre. It was delightful to have it pinned on one's breast by General MacMahon. I left the convoy in October 1917 for the winter. Perhaps before the winter closes the war will end. Who knows? 'Tis time, and yet the work must go on till it is completed. We are in this great struggle to win at any cost. The fight is that of civilization, of all that makes life worth living, against the Prussian creed of might is right. The supremacy of the Hun in Europe is unthinkable. Thanks to the Prussian onslaught, the British Empire has been welded together as the greatest power the world has ever seen. France is fighting magnificently. In a few months, the United States will throw her weight into the scales. The result cannot be in doubt. Germany sees herself economically ruined, and her military caste is now striving desperately to redeem itself and to avert the terrible punishment that the inevitable revolution after the war will bring. A little patience, and the 4 years' agony will produce its reward. Savanière by E.F. King. At Savanière, day followed day, week followed week, and it seemed at times as if months might be added to the sequence. Boredom reigned everywhere, and it taxed each man's ingenuity to fill in the hours. Fortunately, fine weather prevailed, enabling all to enjoy sunbaths in the grounds, and at times tempting some of the more hardy to dip in the little stream. Sports were initiated, starting with a walking handicap twice round the grounds, 1,200 meters, for the English first, and afterwards with a purse put up for the French. The fine weather of late September and early October synchronized with a full moon, and in consequence our slumbers for a few nights were far from peaceful, as friend Fritz started his night visit to the adjoining town, doing considerable damage by means of incendiary bombs to 2 large blocks of buildings, with some loss of life. About October 6th, the weather changed, and with it the attentions of the Hun. The autumn rains fell with steady persistency, and soon our little river showed a strong inclination to break out of bounds. The tent-dwellers had to vacate their quarters precipitately. The waters rose far into the park grounds. Over the little footbridge it roared in a surging torrent, collecting against its weir fallen trees and branches, and threatening thereby its complete destruction. Volunteers were called for to wade in and rescue the structure. By means of a long tow rope and many willing helpers, the fallen timbers were removed from the dam they were forming against the bridge, when the effect soon became apparent in the flood subsiding. As to our future movements, hope and rumor alternately buoyed us up and left us in despair. First we were to be attached to this division, then to that, always, however, to be disappointed. We watched with envious eyes troops move off, but never abandoned hope whilst the RVF camions remained parked outside our walls. With the departure of these lorries, and no order for ourselves, our last hopes went, for now we were the only foreign occupants of the little village. Abandoned, forgotten, we accepted our fate with resignation. A surprise was in store, however, as on October 24th, orders came for us to go somewhere Verdun way on the 26th to relieve another section. Activity prevailed. All was bustle and excitement in loading cars and getting ready to be off early on that morning. On the 25th, the French lieutenant and our leader went up to reconnoiter, and brought back the news of the sector we were to work. On the 26th, at 7:30 a.m., the first 8 cars got off, the other cars following some 3 hours later. The route taken was once more up the Verdun road as far as Souilly, and there turning off via Daugny to Handainville, where we were to be quartered. The start was not propitious, as not long after we found the car towing the kitchen with its engine seized through lack of oil, and further on, first 2 brothers looking disconsolately at their smashed radiator, through butting into the rear of another car, and then another car in a similar plight some 5 kilometers further on. Ichabod. They were left on the road to make shift for themselves, as we could not afford to wait. Orders were to have cars ready to take over the service at 2 o'clock that afternoon. 6 cars arrived soon after 11 o'clock at Handainville and commenced to discharge. We found about 8 rooms allotted to us for living quarters, in cottages in quite fair condition. A few doors and windows were missing, but this proved no drawback in view of 4 or 5 men having to sleep in each room. For a mess room, we had the lower portion of an old barn. The village had not been knocked about unduly, a few houses showing signs of Hun attention, some of which we heard had been quite recent. Homemade tents at Jouy, for tires, petrol, etc. Our cars covered with green branches. 'Twas summer-time. Tea and repos. Hill Trevor camouflaging his car. The right bank of the Meuse. Our service consisted of an alternate 24 hours day duty, with 6 cars at Carrière-Nord, Autremont, and a daily supplemental duty with 2 cars for Carrière-Sud, beyond Douaumont. The evacuation would be to a large hospital at Bonlier, not far distant from our quarters. An American section quartered at Bellevue shared our work at the Nord, and another American section stationed alongside us took the greater part of the work at the Sud. The road for the 2 services lay the same way for some 6 or 7 kilometers, out past Port Victor at Verdun, across the Étain main road, up to Sauterne-Marceau. How one's memories were carried back to previous visits to the glorious city. To those who shared its fortunes in February and March 1916, across the valley there lay Tavannes, and there Ferme Bellevue, here the road we came down by. But how different now everything! Gone the din, chaos, and all the indescribable tumult of those critical days. Gone the daring Hun airman, mysteriously signaling to and producing the whistling, ear-splitting crash of his shells. Gone from her close suburbs all signs of the peril the fair city of Verdun then lay exposed to. Well-kept roads but little used, troops scarcely visible, wayward shells never heard, all so tranquil, gave proof of the changed state of affairs. To those who paid their second visit to Verdun in August 1916, how vividly the memory of those days and nights was recalled. Between these 2 dates the Hun had made incessant and furious assault on the city. Between these two dates the Hun had made incessant and furious assaults on the city. His line had been advanced nearer and nearer to her gates, at some points by many kilometers. The French batteries had been drawn back nearly to the walls of the city itself, and but a narrow range of hills then formed her last barrier. It was then that the moment of her greatest anguish had arrived. She lay almost beaten under the last mighty and superhuman effort of her foes. It was then that the flood of invasion reached its furthest line, for the French poilus had said, "Thus far and no further." Here was the port-chaussée and bridge over which we came and went, here the poste de secours in the Faubourg Park, not at all too healthy just then, and here the road that twisted and turned up past Belleville and beyond to Bras. Gone all the terrific din of the French guns, firing from almost literally every street corner. Gone the incessant answering Boche shell. Gone the hurrying convoys of guns and munitions and ravitaillement. And gone for good that blinding, smothering, overwhelming dust that obliterated everything and everyone, leaving one paralyzed and helpless in its midst. It was only when one recalled all these incidents of the past and observed how far distant all the guns and firing were now that one realized how much ground the French had recovered, and how vain and futile must any fresh Hun efforts be to achieve their object in this direction. Beyond Citerne-Marceau there were two cars, where two cars waited each day to help the American section working Carrière Sud. The road went up past Fort Souville, lying unused to the right, then past Fleury, or what was once the little village of that name, and of which no vestige or trace whatever now remains. Then down the other side, around Piccadilly Circus, up and past grim Douaumont on the left, out into the open, where they said Fritz could see us, and where it was certainly very unhealthy, with badly broken roads, a slight descent, and after an awkward turn in, or rather back down, our destination, Alsace, an old quarry, is reached. Fritz had marked this spot fairly well, and it was never wise to linger too long outside the shelter, or to take any pleasant walks in the vicinity. At first our cars went up to the Sud day and night, whenever the call came for a car, but the road proved to be so narrow at places, and often so badly holed, that the service for our cars eventually became one for daylight only. Americans also waited at Marceau with their wonderful little Fords, and they undertook the night service, with very often one of our men beside the driver as aide. An Englishman had a nasty spill in one of these one night, being ejected from his seat with the driver, whilst there were 3 stretcher cases on board. On dit that the car turned a complete somersault in the hole, but whatever happened, the little marvel came along by itself afterwards, whereas a CMG would have rested there quite hors de combat. What an ideal convoy it would make to have 12 Fords and 12 CMG cars for work of different conditions. For the Carrière Nord, we had 6 cars on duty on alternate days with another American section. The official road was up beyond Marceau, over the top, down into a ravine, a long climb up past Thiaumont, and down into another ravine, then a sharp turn and a steep ascent to the quarry. Our energetic lieutenant and English skipper, however, as usual, found another route up the Bras Road, past Belleville, and then turning sharp right, just before reaching the Poste de Secours, that we evacuated from in August last. Here we again made acquaintance with the Belleville quarry and suburb, with its shattered houses, with the little motor tramway at the top crossroads, and with the cactus-like Bras track. This road saved much contour work and actual distance, and joined up at the bottom of the Thiaumont slope. There were a few unhealthy spots on this road up beyond Thiaumont, and at the last turn into the quarry. Ask 2 of our drivers for verification of this latter position. They had one day all too close an acquaintance with 4 big ones during the last 200 inches. Nothing hit them except stones and mud, but for long these holes stood there as living witnesses to what must have been a noisy and très mauvais 5 minutes. No attack on either side of any moment took place during our visit, but the wastage of war was very apparent in the continuous use of our cars, for generally well over 100 cases for the 24 hours. The ground over which we worked one could only view with a certain amount of reverence, for it was on these heights for now over 3 years that the contest has raged backwards and forwards, until the very formation of the ground appeared to be changed. Where marked on the map is woods, nothing is visible except ground upheaved again and again over every inch, with scarce a stump a foot high to denote what was once some majestic beech or oak. 1 or 2 cars received a few punctures from shrapnel pieces, but the convoy's proverbial good luck held. Sickness knocked out 1 or 2, but the service went through smoothly and efficiently, rewarded eventually by 5 Croix de Guerre for the English and 2 for the French. Rumour soon got busy as to when our division was coming out, but not until the 13th November did we receive orders to quit on the 15th. Cars were once more packed, billets cleaned out, and at 8:15 on the morning of the 15th, the convoy started off for Vitry-le-Poteaux, some 80 kilometers distant. We were a goodly array of some 26 cars, with only 1 left behind, for lack of a rear wheel. The convoy travelled well and entered Vitry soon after 1 p.m. Here we found a clean and peaceful little village, fully occupied and apparently prosperous. Cars were now overhauled, and the long-delayed permissionnaires began to get anxious as to their papers. A big exodus took place a few mornings later, some 10 being seen off, some on leave and others on termination of their contracts. A pleasant ramassage in 2 directions provided a little occupation for some of the men, but otherwise dullness prevailed. The days were short and nights were long, and the adjoining town of Vitry-le-François was both too far and too much out of bounds to provide a rendezvous. We were not too long au repos, however, as we moved up once more on Saturday, December 8th, to Grange-aux-Bois, to work Chalade and Septfontaine, or rather a post a little nearer, Chardon, as the other had been abandoned. Once more we were brought in touch with old familiar surroundings, as in June and July 1916, and September to December 1916. We worked these sectors. Nothing of interest occurred, except that on December 13th we said adieu to Skipper King, who had been with the convoy since July 1916, and A.A. Hannay reigned in his stead. General MacMahon, Duke of Magenta. Croix de Guerre at Savonnières. A shell-proof shelter recovered from the Boche. Carrière-Nord, one of our posts on the right bank of the Meuse. This shelter, built by the Germans and captured by the French, is extremely well built and impervious to shellfire. It was hewn out of the solid rock. Members of the convoy, past and present. A cross denotes a croix de guerre. W. F. Abbott, G. Atkinson, B. H. Barton, W. E. E. Baxter, H. T. Box, J. Bauer, Croix de Guerre, M. T. Buchanan, S. Burton, Croix de Guerre, Bury S. Briggs, C. C. Brakey, Croix de Guerre, R. Branston, W. Brown, M. Castle, Croix de Guerre, N. C. Clements, L. Clements, J. Payne Clark, L. G. Clark, W. A. Daglish, H. McG. Davidson, Croix de Guerre, C. B. Davy, Croix de Guerre, H. K. Finch, Veer Finch, William Fairburn, G. F. Forsdyke, F. B. Fraser, B. German, C. A. Hartley, Croix de Guerre, E. Hyde, Croix de Guerre, F. Hughes, H. E. Hutchinson, E. H. Hacking, J. A. K. Hamilton, A. A. Hannay, Croix de Guerre, William Harker, G. M. C. Hart Smith, C. E. Hill Trevor, Croix de Guerre, E. Hoffman, L. A. Impey, Innes Taylor, L. Irvine, J. K. Jerome, F. A. Jackson, E. H. K, L. F. Kenny, E. F. King, Croix de Guerre, F. A. Knight, William St. Quentin Leng, Croix de Guerre, W. D. Linsell, A. McNeil, W. E. Muir, W. G. Milburn, D. L. Oliver, Croix de Guerre, F. V. Page, F. S. Partridge, Croix de Guerre, H. N. Sauer, S. Southcombe, W. F. Stevens, H. W. Strong, B. Spring Rice, J. S. Tregoning, F. H. Turner, Croix de Guerre, H. Waller, H. Wells, E. Workman. Finis. That is the end of section Sanitaire Anglaise numéro 10 by William St. Quentin Leng.